Growlanser is one of the easiest JRPG series for me to rank and one of the hardest to recommend because far too many people have never even heard of it. For me, Growlanser 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all S-rank games. Growlanser 5 and 6 sit slightly lower, but they are still amazing A-rank experiences. And my love for the series began with one game in particular, Growlanser IV, Wayfarer of Time. I did not begin with the original. I discovered the series through the fourth game, completely fell in love with it, and then went back and played every other mainline entry. Growlanser IV is also the only game I have ever replayed enough times to experience every separate story route. I loved the story. I loved the characters. I loved the progression systems. But more than anything else, I absolutely loved the battle system. Growlanser IV did not simply introduce me to a great game, it introduced me to one of my favorite JRPG series of all time. Growlanser has always occupied a space of its own. It is not a traditional turn-based JRPG, but it is not a conventional grid-based strategy RPG either. Battles take place across open maps, with allies, enemies, and other units moving in real time. You can pause the action to issue commands, but once it resumes, the entire battlefield comes alive. Your fighter may be rushing to intercept an enemy, your mage may be charging a spell, an ally may be trying to escape, civilians may need protection, reinforcements may suddenly arrive from another direction and completely change your priorities. Because everyone physically moves across the battlefield, positioning genuinely matters. You can block a narrow route, split your party, protect a vulnerable character, chase down an enemy spellcaster, or change targets when the situation changes. Many missions also give you more to consider than simply defeating every enemy. You may be defending a location, escorting someone, rescuing civilians, preventing an escape, or trying to complete several objectives at once. That creates a wonderful sense that the battle is part of the story, rather than a separate combat screen that exists only to slow down your journey. Growlanser IV represents this style of combat at its absolute best. The battlefields are constantly asking you to pay attention. A mission that begins with a straightforward objective can turn into a desperate rescue operation, an evacuation, or a race against time. Success is not always binary either. Merely surviving may be enough to continue, but protecting every possible character or achieving the best outcome can be much harder. That is exactly the kind of design I love. I never felt as though I was simply waiting for my next turn. I was watching the whole battlefield, reacting to new information, and trying to prevent several disasters at once. The ability to pause keeps it tactical rather than chaotic. You have time to think, but you still feel the pressure of events unfolding simultaneously. Spellcasting is especially satisfying because powerful magic takes time to prepare. That gives you meaningful choices on both sides of the battle. Do you protect your caster until the spell is ready? Do you interrupt an enemy mage before they can finish? Do you use a quicker action now, or commit to something more powerful that may arrive too late? Even after completing every route, these battles remained exciting because they were built around situations, movement, and decisions, not just statistics. The combat alone would have made Growlanser IV memorable, but it was the combination of gameplay, story, and choice that made me love it this much. The story begins as a conflict involving rival nations, mercenaries, political ambitions, and an ancient threat, but it gradually becomes deeply personal. Characters have their own loyalties, histories, and responsibilities. They do not simply wait for the protagonist to solve everything. Their beliefs can place them on different sides of the same conflict, and your decisions can affect who trusts you, who joins you, who survives, and where the story ultimately goes. The routes are not just slightly different ending scenes attached to an identical adventure. They can change your alliances, your enemies, and your entire position within the conflict. That is why I replayed every one of them. I wanted to save characters I had previously lost. I wanted to understand people who had once been enemies. I wanted to see the consequences of choosing a completely different path. The relationship system gave me another reason to care. Dialogue choices, vacation events, and personal stories allow friendships and romances to develop, while revealing more about the cast and leading to many character-specific conclusions. The progression systems are equally flexible. Ring weapons and gems let you shape each character around a role instead of simply equipping the item with the biggest number. All of these systems support each other. The story makes the battles matter. The battles make the decisions feel urgent, and the routes make the entire journey worth experiencing again. After finishing Growlanser IV, I needed to know whether the rest of the series could offer the same magic. For me, the answer was yes. The original Growlanser already established so much of the series' identity. Real-time tactical battles, political conflict, meaningful choices, character relationships, and a journey in which the protagonist can influence both individuals and nations. Growlanser II continues the world of the first game in a more focused, mission-driven format. It is shorter and more direct, but it keeps the branching decisions, tactical objectives, and multiple outcomes that make the series special. Growlanser III moves to a different setting and cast, while preserving the same mixture of exploration, character development, and fast-moving tactical combat. Each game approaches the formula differently, but none of the first 4 entries feels like a disposable sequel. They all have memorable casts, ambitious stories, and battles that ask you to think about the entire situation, rather than merely select the strongest attack. That is why I rank Growlanser I, II, and III alongside 4 as S-rank games. Growlanser IV remains my personal favorite, but playing the earlier entries showed me that the qualities I loved were not an accident. They were the identity of the series. Growlanser V, Heritage of War, and Growlanser VI, Precarious World changed the presentation and experimented with the formula more heavily. For me, they do not quite reach the incredible level of the first 4 games, so I would place both of them in A rank rather than S. But that should not be mistaken for a negative verdict. They are still ambitious, unusual, and genuinely excellent JRPGs. They retain the series' focus on active battlefields, character development, and large political conflicts while moving into a more fully three-dimensional style. Growlanser VI is particularly important because it directly continues the world and story of 5. It answers questions left by Heritage of War, revisits familiar places and characters, and improves several of the systems introduced in the previous game. It was never officially released in English, but an English fan translation patch allows it to be played today. As of today, the latest public release is version 0.2.3. The project still officially describes the patch as a work in progress. However, I personally completed the entire game with it, from beginning to end, without encountering any problems that prevented me from playing. So although the team continues to polish the translation and fix issues, Growlanser VI is already very playable in practice. Anyone planning to play it should still begin with Growlanser V, because 6 is a true sequel rather than a disconnected new story. The original Growlanser also needs a fan translation for English-speaking players. The current project focuses on the PlayStation version. Its main script has been fully translated, and playable testing builds exist, but editing, testing, and remaining bug fixes are still being completed. The expanded PSP remake is a separate version with additional material, and it still does not have a complete English patch. Fan translations require an enormous amount of difficult and often invisible work. These teams are not simply replacing a few menu labels, they are working through huge scripts, technical restrictions, custom formats, fonts, graphics, movies, bugs, and years of testing. Without them, English-speaking players could easily miss 2 major entries in an already overlooked series. Their work preserves hidden gems and allows entirely new audiences to experience them. Growlanser deserves far more recognition than it receives. It combines political storytelling, personal relationships, branching choices, flexible character building, and one of my favorite battle systems in any JRPG series. And Growlanser IV brings all of those strengths together better than any other entry in my opinion. It is the game that made me fall in love with Growlanser. It is the game that convinced me to play every other mainline title. And it remains the only game that made me complete every separate story route, simply because I was not ready to leave its characters and world behind. I would love to see Atlus and Sega bring the series back through remasters, a complete collection, official translations for Growlanser I and VI, or even an entirely new entry. Until that happens, Growlanser will remain one of the greatest forgotten JRPG series I have ever played. Growlanser 5 and 6 are excellent A-rank games. Growlanser 1, 2, and 3 are easy S ranks. And Growlanser 4, Wayfarer of Time, is not only S rank, it is one of my favorite JRPGs of all time. Which other JRPG series would you place alongside Growlanser in S tier and would like to be revived? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this retrospective, like the video and subscribe for more JRPG content.